All right, we'll go live now. And we'll give it just a moment or two to give folks time to join us. Find our place. Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's live online author event with Greenlight Bookstore. I'm Jessica from Greenlight, and we are thrilled to be hosting once again tonight's reading with the one-story literary debutantes, which this year include Pemi Aguda, Puloma Ghosh, Shannon Sanders, and Uche Okonkwo. So we're so excited to hear from them. Your hosts for this evening are one-story co-founder Hannah Tinti and Adam Vitcavage of the podcast Debutiful, so you know that you're in for an excellent time with them. Before I turn things over to them, just a couple little housekeeping things to mention. In our Zoom webinar tonight, you can see and hear the speakers, but they can't see or hear you. They can see that you're here, though, and you can interact with the authors and with each other throughout tonight's event, which we highly encourage, via the chat, which you can find by clicking on the icon that looks like a little speech balloon. You're welcome to post your comments and thoughts in the chat. It's a great way to show your appreciation for the author and interact with fellow attendees as well. We'll also be dropping some links in the chat, including buy links, because all of tonight's featured books are available for sale from greenlightbookstore.com. And when you purchase a book from Greenlight for pickup at our store or for shipping anywhere in the country, you're not only supporting these incredible debut authors, you're supporting your local independent bookstore and allowing us to continue to make space, both virtual and IRL, for conversations and connections around books. And as thanks for attending tonight's virtual event, we're offering 10% off all the featured books when you order online. Just enter the coupon code Greenlight Events 10 in the coupon discount code at checkout, and I'll drop that in the chat as well. You don't have to memorize it. Okay, a couple of little intros. Our host and MC for this evening is Adam Vitcavage, who's been called the champion of debut authors and is the founder of Debutiful, a literary media outlet that helps readers discover debut authors. Its podcast has been named a Best Book Podcast by Electric Literature, Book Riot, Town & Country, Los Angeles Review of Books, and elsewhere. And his criticism and interviews have been featured in Electric Literature, Pace Magazine, and The Millions, among others. And he lives in Denver with his wife, so we're really glad to have him with us virtually this evening. Just before that, though, to tell you a little bit more about I'm going to back up. To tell you a little bit more about what being a one-story debutante is all about, we'll hear from Hannah Tinti, who's a co-founder and executive editor of the award-winning magazine One Story. Hannah's also a writer, editor, and teacher, and the author of the short story collection Animal Crackers and the best-selling novels The 12 Lives of Samuel Hawley and The Good Thief. Super excellent, highly recommend. Hannah and One Story are frequent collaborators with Greenlight, and we're so glad to be partnered with them once again this evening. So to get us started, Hannah, please take it away.
Okay, here I am. Hey, everybody. Thanks so much, Jessica. It's so wonderful to be back working with Greenlight again. Somebody dropped in the chat asking about closed captions. If you want to turn the closed captions on, all you do is click the three dots that say more, and there should be a button there that actually opens up your closed captions, and we'll make them work for the screen. And I'd love it if anyone just dropped in where you were logging in from, so we could, in the chat, so we can sort of see who's here. That would be really great as well. And one of my favorite things about online readings is the chat, because what it does is allow you to kind of respond to things people are saying, to images or ideas that are being presented, lines, and just see what else other readers, other listeners are also responding to. And it ends up being this really sort of like fun side thing. The other thing is it allows the writers to get a sense of you responding to them in place. So look at all these people from the Bronx, from Washington, from Connecticut, from New Jersey, from Missouri. Hey, Philly's in the house. We got all these people coming in from around the country. Thanks so much. South Carolina. All right. Fairfield, Connecticut. Oh my God. Hey, everybody. It's great to see you. Oh yeah, Mary Beth is reminding me, my co-founder, is that you should post to everyone. If you click on the button up at the top, it'll say, sending a chat to a single person, or you can click that to say everyone, and then that will go in the group into the chat. I think that's all the housekeeping. I just want to say a few words about One Story Magazine, because some people here might not know what it is. One Story is a literary magazine that publishes one short story at a time. And Mary Beth and I started it actually over 20 years ago, which is absolutely insane. But we've been going, ever since. And we sort of started it with a few principles. And one of them was like, what does it mean to read a single short story just by itself? And how that's a very sort of really unique, special experience. It was Mary Beth Botch's idea. She belonged to a writing group that would send each other short stories. And she just said, wow, it's really incredible. Just read a story with nothing else around it, just by itself as a standalone work of art. So it's about reading one story at a time. It's also about treating all of our writers the same. So one month we might have somebody like at the beginning of this year, we had Suzanne Wang. It was the first thing she'd ever published. And then the next month we had Dave Eggers, who's, widely published and, really established. But the stories looked exactly the same. They got paid exactly the same amount, and were promoted, and everything was exactly the same. So we have this like idea about equality and treating writers equally, no matter where they were in their writing careers. And then the other thing is we made the rule that we would never publish an author more than once. We're actually the only literary magazine that has that rule. And one of the reasons why we started it when we began the magazine 20 years ago is that we always wanted one story to be an open door. And we felt that as much as, some literary magazines sort of publish the same writers over and over again, and they're kind of like creating an aesthetic, which can be really interesting. What we wanted to do with One Story was just always be publishing new writers, looking for emerging writers, looking for new voices, giving everybody sort of a chance to have their moment on stage. And so I think that's something that Adam does with Debutiful in a really wonderful way, championing debut authors. So we're really happy to partner with you tonight. And thank you for giving us the opportunity to showcase these 4 amazing short story collections, which you'll hear from tonight. And then I hope for those of you who are in the New York area, you'll join us on May 1st for the One Story Debutante Ball. I'll put a link to that in the chat. And then you'll get to meet all these writers in person and hang out with me as well on the dance floor. But I'm going to turn this over to Adam. Thank you again to Greenlight. And thank you for coming to support these 4 amazing short story writers.
Hannah, thank you so much. I'm so stoked to be here. All the authors tonight have either been on Debutiful's podcast or will be on Debutiful's podcast. I have known Shannon at this point for, I feel like, years, because I interviewed her years ago before her debut even came out. So I'm excited for her. I'm excited for the other 3. We're going to introduce some readings for you. If you like my style of how I chat, check out debutiful.net. There's a website and a podcast, but I won't promote myself. Let's promote these amazing authors. First up, reading will be Pemi Aguda, who is from Lagos, Nigeria, published in Granta, Zoetrope, and more. Her writing has been awarded the O. Henry Prize for Short Fiction, a Henfield Prize, a NAMO Award for Short Fiction, and the Rightivism Prize. Her novel In Progress won the 2020 Deborah Rogers Foundation Writers Award, and she was a 2021 Miami Book Fair Fellow in Fiction and a 2022 McDowell Fellow, a graduate from the Helen Zell Writers Program at the University of Michigan. Her work has been supported by the Breadloaf Writers Conference, an Aspen Words Emerging Writer Fellowship, and an Octavia Butler Memorial Scholarship. Ghostroots, her debut collection, will be published by W.W. Norton in less than a few weeks in May 2024. Pemi, how are you doing tonight?
I'm happy to be here. Thanks, Adam.
So much. And I'll just turn it over to you. What will you be reading for us tonight?
Okay. First of all, thank you everybody for being here, and thanks for that intro, Adam. I will be reading an excerpt from my short story called The Hollow. I'm going to just go right to the middle. The only thing you should know is that Arit is a young architect who's measuring Madame Oni's house for a renovation, and the story kind of slips between 2 different timelines.
All right, take it away. Thank you so much.
From the outside, Madame Oni's house is comprehensible. With Lucky eagerly holding one end of the measuring tape, Arit's site plan and perimeter measurements come together in little more than an hour. She looks up at the house again. The pointed arches of the windows should be better suited to a church, a sanctuary, a building that evil skirts around, passes over. On the inside, Madame Oni has disappeared, and Arit's calculations still don't add up. She checks and rechecks lengths and widths and heights and never gets the same reading twice. The tape retracts into itself and bites her fingers again and again. This uncertainty, this shiftiness, this impossibility causes a ringing in her head. Unmoored, she feels as if the walls are the floor and she's leaning against the ceiling, her torso wedged into a window frame. A fear clunks up her ribs, a fear that nothing is real and everything is upside down and elementally wrong. She turns into another lonely corner, seeking a way out, and the sun is streaming through two slender panes, lighting up the carpet. What does it mean to fix a house? Arit wonders. To make firm, stable, or stationary, to repair, to put in a position to make no further trouble. Madame Oni reappears and guides Arit to a chair, a hand on her elbow. They take a few steps, or they cross several rooms. The woman pushes a plate of cabin biscuits and a cup of warm Milo to her. Arit, who associates these with her childhood and rain, looks out to see that yes, it is indeed raining, and she blinks repeatedly, reminding herself that she is not 14, and she is an adult, and she is safe. The woman who lived in the large handbag with many pockets made a plan. She sold ashoebi from a tiny shop in Balogun Market, saving all the profits, every tip. She sold zobo at church events and rice at community gatherings, the sun darkening her skin, firewood smoke staining her lungs. She opened a bank account, hid the multiplying money from her husband, whose character grew weaker, and the power in his swings, in his words, stronger. She bought land in a part of Lagos that wouldn't become popular for another 18 years, a part she had to access on foot because the closest bus stop was 20 minutes away. She hired an eager draftsman who advertised his services in colorful letters under bridges. And when it was time to build, she oversaw the project herself, breathing her fear into the foundation, sweating her resolve into the concrete walls. She rinsed herself at the site so her husband wouldn't smell new beginnings on her. Soon, no more. She chanted in her head every night he added a scar to her skin. Every night she added a terrified scream to her son's memory. When the last shingle was nailed to the roof, the woman put her son on her back and left, taking nothing else. That first night, they slept on the bare floor, burrowing into each other. A house is freedom. A house is an escape. This one sensed their dread, their relief, and stood vigilant, ready to protect. How can you know a house if you don't sleep in it? Some say that light is the success of any building, but what new angles might darkness reveal? The last evening Arit spent with her uncle, he took the pencil from her hand, shading dark the windows on the front elevation, shuttering the paper house they designed together. It's nighttime for our inhabitants, he said in a cartoony voice, and Arit laughed, enjoying this effort of imagination, the breath of it. The woman who lived in the house of freedom was found by her husband. On that lot so far away from everything, he climbed the gate, breaching the perimeter, cutting his shin, trailing blood across the compound. He broke a lock, nothing but death swelling in his chest, coating his throat. The house bristled defensively around the sleeping mother and son, inhaling and exhaling, and the man felt the draft on his neck, on the meat of his hand gripping the knife. He moved from room to room, hunting, but every turn took him back to where he began. The walls shifted and the floors wavered, and he was bewildered. Each door led to a hallway that led to a dead end, the sharp arches of glass twinkling at him, promising pain. Exhausted and dizzy, he leaned into a corner, seeking an anchor, protection, though from what he did not know. He felt a loss of control. The house balked at his weight, at his entitlement to support. It closed in on him, deviating and rearranging itself until a hollow appeared between walls, between floors, between walls, and there the intruder was folded in, trapped, never to hurt again. A house can be a prison too. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much, everyone. Please give Pemi love in the chat. What a beautiful excerpt. Thank you so much for reading for us. Our next reader is Puloma Ghosh, who this is unofficially your first virtual reading. So exciting. Everyone keep all the props. This is so exciting. Your book's not out for a while. Let me read your official bio. She is a fiction writer based in Chicago. Her work has appeared in One Story, Craft Literary, Cut Leaf, and other publications, and is forthcoming in No Tokens and Cake Zine. She's received support from Tin House summer workshops and an MFA from Bennington College writing seminars. Her short story collection, Mouth, will be published by Astra House on June 11th, 2024. How are you doing tonight?
Good. I have like chills from that reading.
So beautiful. And I cannot wait to hear from yours. Mouth, such an exciting short story collection. What will you be reading for us tonight?
I'm going to be reading the opening of a story called K, which is also the story that was published in One Story.
Terrific. Well, take it away. Let's just get right into K.
Awesome. K appears, as always, around midnight, a silhouette on my ex-roommate's stripped bed. Outside the window is chewable black, broken only by the pinprick of the groundskeeper's porch light. The rest of my room is still. 2 wardrobes at the foot of my bed, 2 desks, one cluttered, one bare, the padlock maintenance hatch on the ceiling. I know it's snowing because of the silence. "Good night, Kay," I say, hoping it will make her disappear, but she remains there, sitting upright until my eyes close. She visits my dreams as a full-fleshed girl. She crawls into my bed and wraps her arms around me. Her face is round and dewy, doe eyes under overgrown bangs. "Isn't it better to sleep this way?" she asks, resting her head on my chest. "Yes," I say, holding her close. It feels like she belongs only to me, like a lover or a child, even though the whole campus takes ownership of her. Our Kay, our ghost. Throughout the years, many people have disappeared from this little mountain town. The incidents go back far longer than a single person's lifespan, and the victims have nothing in common. The theories are endless: alien abduction, portals to other worlds, unconfirmed rumors of occult activity. No bodies are ever found. The only university student counted among the missing is Kay, an orphan photography major who disappeared one winter, leaving behind her belongings in the dorm room where I now sleep. Like all freshmen, I learned of Kay during orientation, sitting on the main lawn with a blanket between our bare legs and the ticks, listening to our orientation leader's last words of advice. My OL Anya was unbearably cool. Short platinum hair, heavy eyeliner, tight black clothes. She leaned close and asked, "Are any of you in Lewis 309? I raised my hand, and she fixed her foggy eyes on me with a smirk. "Watch out, that's Kay's room." From then on, we noticed that Kay came up often in conversation like an inside joke. If a door closed by itself or a book slipped off a table, someone would ask, "Is that you, Kay?" That initial ricocheted through campus like an invocation, even though nobody had actually seen her, not like I have. Not long into first semester, my roommate swallowed a bottle of sleeping pills and went to the ER, then home, and that's when Kay began to appear at night. Mirroring me on the other bed, a petite silhouette who refuses to fade no matter how much I blink. We cohabit like this for a couple months, me half convinced she is harmless, formless, maybe only a story I tell myself and others during the day. Soon it's December, and I wake before my alarm to an unnatural chill. My blanket is cold all the way through from the air coming in the window adjacent my bed. Outside, the season's first snow falls over a desaturated landscape. White field, spindly grove of bare trees beyond it, cloud-choked sky. In moments like this, when the world turns over in the span of one night, I feel something shift inside me too, a little click. The gauzy light reveals the impression of a body on the plastic mattress that once belonged to my roommate. I press my palm to it and find it warm. Someone my shape and size has slept there. Stop there.
Thank you so much for reading such a good story. The chat is popping off. I don't know if you have it up, but thank you so much for reading. Our next reader, just released her book yesterday. So exciting. Uche Okonkwo's stories have been published in A Public Space, One Story, The Kenyon Review, The Best American Non-Required Reading, and Lagos Noir, among others. A former Bernard O'Keeffe Scholar at the Breadloaf Writers Conference and a resident at Art Ami, she is a recipient of the George Bennett Fellowship at Phillips Exeter Academy, a Steinbeck Fellowship, and an Elizabeth George Foundation grant. Okonkwo grew up in Lagos, Nigeria, and is currently pursuing a creative writing PhD at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln. A Kind of Madness, her first book, was just published yesterday. Uche, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for being here. I'm going to be reading from a short story called Eden. And just to give a little bit of context, because I will not be reading from the opening, the story is about two kids in Lagos in the 90s, a brother and a sister. Madu is the brother, 10 years old. Ifechi is 7 years old, a girl. They have recently discovered their father's stash of porn tapes, and they've been making their way through the tapes, watching them slowly. And so now we're going to see a scene where this kind of affects the family dynamic. Okay. One rainy night, when there was no electricity, the children played catch the light with their father. Their mother lay on the couch, laughing and shouting warnings. Catch the light was their game, invented by their father for nights like this, when electricity was gone and stomachs were full and the silence in the room had no extra weight to it. He would put out the candles and let the warm darkness surround them. Then he would turn on his flashlight and move the beam of light on the floor and all around the room, the children scrambling to touch it with their hands or feet. It was the only game they played together. The stakes were high on this night. Their father had promised the winner 3 over-the-head spins to be redeemed at any time of the winner's choosing. Madu and Ifechi loved being held above the head of their tall father, loved opening their eyes to see the furniture, barely discernible in the dark, whirling around them. A dizzying sensation remained after they were set down gently, like honey lingering on their tongues. But most of all, they loved the chafing feel of their father's palms as he gripped them, and they imagined that his hands left imprints that remained long after he let go. The children rushed from spot to spot, shrieking and stretching their limbs towards the light. But just when they thought they'd got it, the light would move away and they would laugh out their frustration. The light was all they could see, and they followed it wherever it went, sometimes bumping into each other and their father. One time, their father directed the beam of light to a spot close to his feet. Ifechi followed, but instead of chasing the light, her eyes landed on her father's right foot. The nail of his big toe was long, yellow from the light, specks of dirt or lint stuck in the corners where nail met skin. Ifechi could not move. In one of her father's films, a man had moaned in ecstasy while he kissed and nibbled on a woman's foot, sucked on the dainty toes with their red nail polish, opened his mouth wide as half of the woman's foot vanished into it. Ifechi felt her heart pounding as she pulled her eyes away from her father's foot. She glanced at her mother's dark form on the couch. Had her mother's feet ever disappeared into the mouth of her father like that, like prey being consumed by a python? Had her father made sounds just like the man in the film, like he was dying but didn't want it to stop? Ifechi tried to find her father's face in the gloom, certain that he knew what she was thinking, what she and Madu had done. But he was still moving the light, and Madu was still running and screaming. Everything felt normal. When their father was ready to let someone win, it was Madu who was chosen. Madu and their father spun together, their laughter filling the empty spaces in the room, while Ifechi watched with remorse from her place on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you so much for reading it. I am going to again put in the Greenlight link for A Kind of Madness because week 1 sales are super important. Please buy A Kind of Madness. Also pre-order Ghostroots and Mouth. That is super duper important. And you know what else is important? Buying a book 6 months after the book comes out, which is Shannon's book. Shannon Sanders, our next reader, is the author of the Lynx short story collection Company, which is a finalist for the LA Times Book Prize's Art Steinenbaum First Fiction Award. Her short fiction has appeared in Southeast Review, One Story, Sewanee Review, Virginia Quarterly Review, Tri Quarterly, and elsewhere. And she has received the Penn Robert J. Dow Short Story Prize for Emerging Writers. And unofficially, I think she's the world's biggest X-Files fan. Shannon, how are you doing tonight?
I am great. I'm so excited to be here. Thanks, everyone.
What will you be reading first? You have so many great short stories. What are you selecting for us tonight?
I am also going to read from my one story. It is called The Everest Society. It was one story issue number 263. And I'm going to read from the very beginning, thanks largely in part to edits from Will Allison and Patrick Ryan, who I see here in the chat. I don't think I need to set anything up. So this is the beginning of The Everest Society.
Thank you. Take it away.
8 days before the social worker's home visit, Liv squeezed into the lobby of her apartment building to find that the elevator meeting had already started. She scanned the crowd until she located her husband, Dante, who'd apparently arrived early enough to score a seat near the front of the room, now crowded with residents. Liv tried to catch Dante's eye, but he was preoccupied, his brow furrowed as the conversation thrummed toward a fever pitch. Nishan, their neighbor from the 8th floor, wanted to know what the hell was taking so long. It was starting to get ridiculous, he said, slapping a knee for emphasis, trudging up and down 7 flights of stairs like goddamn mountain climbers. He and his neighbors on 8, they had taken to calling themselves the Everest Society, had started a group text among themselves, a perpetual flurry of notifications about who'd be hitting the mailbox soon, who didn't mind carrying home an extra carton of milk, and so forth, thereby sparing the, forgive his expression, older aunties of the 8th floor, Sylvia and Thomasina, who huddled together and winced at this, but urged him on, from having to make the trek for basic necessities. Not that I mind helping my neighbors, but we have it the worst of anybody, he concluded, waving a hand to indicate the members of the beleaguered Everest Society, the dozen or so nodding heads scattered throughout the lobby crowd. Fix this or tell us how much longer. Liv caught Gracie, the arthritic brunette from 7, rolling her eyes at the worst of anybody. And Nishan, I want you to know we hear you. Noelle, addressing the group in her capacity as board president, raised her voice over the sudden eruption of applause, the bleated amens from the 4th floor Robinsons. All of us, and that includes management and myself, everybody in this room was expecting a working elevator by now. And we're, how much longer? Josette from 5, a bag of Doritos perched on her arms. Noelle's mouth snapped shut, and she knelt behind the stack of folded chairs that served as her podium. She reappeared holding aloft a sheaf of papers, from which she read aloud as if to a room full of kindergartners. We apologize for the delay and for any inconvenience residents may experience as we complete the renovation. We have enclosed an updated work order, including a new projected completion date. Liv leaned forward and strained to hear. The back row, land of the day late and the dollar short. Normally, you could show up to these things right on time and still get a front and center seat, inches from Noelle and her chair-stacked podium and her binder smugly labeled board. Hardly any owners and absolutely no renters cared about the usual substance of board meetings, budget stuff, and whether to cover the bald spots in the wretched hallway carpets. Liv came always because patching the carpets meant incremental increases in property value, and normally she luxuriated in the front row with her notepad in one hand and her voting paddle in the other. The voting paddles, lime green index cards on popsicle sticks, had in fact been Liv's idea. You could tell each time Noelle reluctantly called for a vote that she was pissed not to have thought of it first. They had voted months earlier on replacing the elevator, first on the initial question of whether, a unanimous yes from board members frustrated by its chronic outages and concerned about rental appeal. Then they voted again on when, the winters, Liv among them, greatly outnumbering the summers. The elevator did its most egregious stalling in the witch's tit chill of January, once trapping Liv and Dante between 3 and 4 for several minutes, before Dante succeeded in wrenching the doors open, an experience that went from harrowing to momentarily sexy to outright mortifying in the time it took him to pull her to the safety of Forrest's threadbare hallway floor, where a clutch of Robinsons stood in pajamas cheering. Anyway, it turned out that everyone came to board meetings that concerned the elevator, defunct until its pricey replacement was installed. Make that everyone and their sister when the projected completion date had come and gone a week earlier. Workers still roamed the halls in the mornings, babies still woke to incessant drilling, and the big problem, the only way up from the lobby was the steep cinder block gauntlet of the emergency stairwell. New completion date, read Noelle from another page. She paused, cleared her throat, shifted her weight from one leg to the other. Enjoying the other's suspense, of course, was the main reason to take on a thankless job like this one. Monday, March 4th, or week thereof. A brick of hot clay formed in Liv's throat. The social worker was due just a few days after that. She coughed loudly, trying and failing to get Dante's attention. "What the fuck?" shrilled Nishan. I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. Thank you to all of our readers, Pemi, Puloma, Uche, and Shannon. I'm going to ask a few questions. If you're in the chat and you have a general question for all the writers, go ahead and throw it into it. I can't guarantee I'll get to it just because we're on short time, but I love questions from the audience, so I'll try to get one in. My first question for all of you, and whoever wants to open it up, is just a simple, what did you learn about yourself while writing your book and all these stories in the past, like leading up to publication? What was the biggest thing you learned about yourself? Whoever wants to go first, or I'll start picking like we're in a high school class. Shannon, you have the most experience doing interviews with people like me. What did you learn about yourself while writing company?
What did I learn about myself? I definitely learned that, so first of all, I learned that I'm a very, when I'm enjoying a story, I am very, very focused on it, and I will plow through a scene. I am a person who, even though I know that revision is really important to the whole process, and I know that there's a lot of work that goes into getting the story where you want it, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist when it comes to drafting. So I did a lot of these stories. There are 13 stories in the book, and the vast majority of them I drafted for the first time in 1 or max 2 or 3 sittings. So I learned that, that it's always easier with that kind of intensity for me to just get something out on the page.
Definitely. Pemi, how about you? What did you learn writing Ghostroots?
I think in some ways the opposite of that, just in the sense that I think that when I resist immediacy, I am like maybe a better writer. Because the oldest story in Ghostroots was 2016. That's like 8 years ago. And back then I could write a story just in one sitting, but not anymore. And I think that difference is a good difference. Yeah, that's my answer.
Uche or Paloma, do you have any things you learned about yourselves while writing your debut books?
Yeah, I think I have learned for myself that it's good practice for me to not start writing a thing until I have a sense of how it's going to end. Because I have done let's start with an emotion or an idea and just see where it goes. That never works for me. Those stories are never completed. But I need to sit with the story and figure out where it's going. Of course, it will change. The ending will probably change, but I need to have a destination to write towards before I start writing.
I feel like this is really left field because everyone has talked about like the process of writing, but I feel like the biggest thing I learned, because when I first started writing these stories a while ago, I thought that I would be a person who writes realist fiction, and I kept putting monsters in, and then I realized about myself that I actually don't want to write anything that doesn't have monsters and ghosts and like fantastical elements. I love to read realist fiction, but for myself, I want to write fantastical things.
Definitely, yeah. I was never a horror sci-fi reader or watcher until like recently. It's become all I can like really focus on. It's so interesting how like taste changes and what you like learn about yourself as you're diving into art. My next question, I had sent you all a question. I'm gonna focus it in and ask you about the story you had read tonight and ask what was either like the trickiest part or the easiest part of getting that story that you read tonight out there. Paloma, I'll start with you since you were the last to go. With Kay, what was easy or what was hard with it?
It was so hard to learn how much to give the reader in the process of editing, especially because in a speculative story, like in a short story, you have so little space, you have to be really economical about how much world building you do. And I tend to start by giving as little as possible. And then in the editing process, seeing like what I need to add and put in. And I think for Kay, because as it gets further into the story, there is a lot of things going on, and all of it is like surreal. I had to learn how to give the reader more like concrete facts about what is going on in the world.
And whoever else wants to jump in.
Um, uh, the story I read, I think the most difficult thing about it was, I think, just the best way to handle the subject matter, because it's about children and it's about sex. So how do you do that without it being how do you make it tasteful? How do you make it not too uncomfortable? It's supposed to be uncomfortable, but how do you strike that balance between the level of discomfort that you need to achieve what the story is trying to do, and also keeping in mind child characters? That was very difficult.
Yeah, I would say about this story. So the Ever Society takes place in an apartment building, and it has a pretty large cast of characters. So even in just that brief excerpt, there are several characters introduced. Only really two of them are central to the story. The other ones just kind of float in and out. But throughout the book, I have a bunch of stories that involve sort of ensemble scenes and casts of characters. And I really like the challenge of managing large casts of characters. But I would say that the challenge is always going to be knowing that your reader will perhaps struggle to keep track of who everyone is and maybe to track what's important in the story, making sure that you're really balancing the flow of information and the introduction of characters with what is really needed for the experience to be seamless. So I ended up having a lot of fun with that because I would think of it as sort of like being at a party. You walk around, you meet a person for a few minutes, they tell you something about themselves, and then you have to do the work of deciding what to retain about that person in case you run into them again. And yeah, initially I definitely felt like there was a worry that there were maybe too many characters, but the challenge became to make sure that they were all being managed well and given their chance to say what they needed to say in service of the story.
For me, I think it was definitely point of view. Over the years that I wrote this story, the point of view kept changing. At some point, it was narrated from the house's point of view. So it's very different. It is very different now. So yeah, it was point of view, whose story this was. Arit actually showed up pretty late in the drafting process, and I was like, oh, okay, here you are. And this is one of the only stories I've written with more than one timeline. So it was a learning process, and it was even right up until editing, I wasn't quite sure how the pacing was working till the end. So it was a real learning curve.
I have a question from kind of the audience. It's from Hannah at One Story. First, she says this is the first year that all the debutantes are collections, which we're making short stories. We're bringing it back hard. The 2023, 2024, 2025, even I've seen some short stories that I'm excited about. So stoked for short story collections. Hannah wants to know how you decided on the order of your collections. That is so vital that when it comes to flow, pace, vibe. How did you all figure out the sequence of your collections?
So I happened to get a little bit of advice, maybe this was through a class, but from Patrick Ryan himself, who suggested making sure to be strategic about placing some of the heavy hitting stories throughout the book to hold on to reader interest. I knew I wanted to start with a story that was strong and that I thought was really going to hook the reader in certain ways. And so I picked a story that I thought would suit that purpose. And then I knew that I wanted to end on a note of positivity and optimism. And so I chose the Everest Society for the final story in the collection because I felt like it achieved that. Spoiler alert. And then throughout, I tried really hard again to think of that reader experience of encountering a character in one context and then getting a chance to meet them again in another one that would be surprising, revelatory in a way that I hoped would be rewarding.
I thought a lot about this, and the order of my stories changed like so many times. But I always wanted to end it with Persimmons because it was so apocalyptic. And someone told me at one point, and I forget who, sorry, to order the stories in your collection like they're songs on an album. So I started listening to like my favorite music albums and thinking about like the emotional like trajectories of them. Where do they like hype you up and where do they let you rest and things like that. And then finally I read reread Revenge by Yoko Ogawa and realized that it's a linked collection, but it's like not really a linked collection because the link is like one small thing or like one side character that appears in one story is like the main character in the next story. But in like a very far away plot. And I thought about taking a thread from one story to the next as like a kind of leash almost.
I love Revenge. Everybody should read Revenge. For me, I think I didn't have a clear idea. My agent and my editor and I talked a lot about just variety in terms of point of view and length, and not every story had like a high-pitched supernatural element. So making that also differ from story to story. But I remember my thesis advisor saying that a lot of the stories in my collection were about people who were like seeking freedom in some kind of way. So it might be a nice way to end the collection that kind of gestures towards that. And so that's what we ended up doing.
For me, very similarly to Pemi's, it was kind of like a consensus type decision-making process, but we all agreed that Burning should be the last story because we all agreed that it had that sense of like resonance and like staying power. So we ended with Burning, but with everything else, it was kind of balancing length, point of view, like age of characters, so child characters versus adult characters, length. Yeah, just kind of figuring it out that way.
Definitely. We have time for a few more questions. Audience, throw some at me. We can get through them. I'll mix it. Yeah, I'll ask looking into the future. So, two of you have books out, two of you have books coming out this spring/summer, but where do you want to take your writing from here? Not necessarily what you're working on, but like what do you hope to push yourself with in the future?
Okay, I can go. I want to get weirder, you know? I want to get weirder. I want to get stranger. All the books I love are just short, strange books, and I'm reading books that were published a long time ago. I'm reading books from really tiny presses. I'm reading books in translation, and all of this is just, I just want to get weirder. But something else I've been thinking about recently is that a lot of my characters tend to be like outsiders, and now I'm curious about like group dynamics. So I'm interested in taking my fiction to places that are in the center like friendship groups, cults, like membership groups, like clubs, like things like that, like in the middle of those kind of situations, like what does the point of view look like from inside there?
I'll add, so I have a little bit of the same answer. I also want to get weirder with it. So there are a couple stories in Company that have a slipstream angle to them. And what I'm working on now is kind of more directly that. And so I think that that has been really interesting and challenging. It's hard to answer this question without getting into the what are you working on next thing. But I
You
don't
could get
mind.
into it if you want to.
Yeah. So the answer to that is that the next thing that I'm working on is in fact a novel, and that definitely exercises really different muscles from, you know, the short story muscles for sure, because as everyone always says, a short story, you can see the shape of it, you know, pretty clearly in your mind, and you can ideally you can hold the whole thing in your mind. With a novel, there's a lot more wandering around and having to go and retrieve things from different rooms and yeah, so I'm interested to see whether I can get those muscles to work through the finish line, pretty much.
I really want to like expand the worlds and like the scope of my work. Of course, I'm also working on a novel, but also like thinking about future stories and novels. And I just want to delve into like every genre that excites me with like a literary slant. I want to do romance, I want to do metaphysical horror and serious science fiction. And I just want to like try everything that I really love and get pleasure from reading and watching in my own way.
I I guess I'm challenging myself by attempting to write a novel next. Um, it's I don't want to say too much about it, but I will just say that it's going to involve consuming a lot of pregnancy and childbirth content. Yeah.
Yeah, I cannot wait to read it. Oh, I've read all your books already. Love them. Cannot wait to read what's next. I have three quick questions, or as long as we want. We might go over everyone. That's just the reality of live webinars. Three questions, and then my final question. We'll go through these. Sharon asks, how many stories in your collection were unpublished before they were put into the collection?
So before it went into before the collection came together of the 13 stories, 8 were published and the other 5 were unpublished, and then another 2 of them were published during the publication process leading up to when the book actually came out.
Everyone's frantically counting their stories.
For me, of the 10 in the collection, like 7 had been published. One got published in the process of the book being put together. And I think at this point, only one has not appeared anywhere. No, 2. 2 haven't appeared anywhere.
Yeah, that's my number too.
I've had 3 published, 3 are forthcoming, and I have 11, so there's 5 left.
Yeah, terrific. It's always interesting how that works, because I think most people think like you write a book, it comes out, but with short stories, it's a long life cycle from your first story to publication of a short story collection. Lena Valencia, who has a debut book coming out August 6th, Mystery Lights. I got to give a shout out to her, asked a question. What was the most exciting and rewarding aspect of your debut publication process? And Lena, I hope I got that date right still.
I'll go first. Visiting book clubs has been really special, and a lot of things about it have been really special, but of course, writers work in silence and solitude, and there is very little opportunity sometimes to really get to interface with readers at all, until the book is published. And then once it is, even then, you don't get to hear what people think or get to interact all that much about the work. And so it's always a huge joy for me to get to visit with book clubs and just even kind of like eavesdrop on what people think or what they made of it.
Um, one of the most exciting things for me, and I think I found this surprising, but one of the most exciting and pleasurable things for me was receiving blurbs from people that we had asked for blurbs. It just felt like such an act of kindness and generosity to take the time to read someone's work and like say genuinely nice things about the work. So that felt very good.
Yeah, I second that answer. It's just like special when like all these people who you admire take time to read your book and then say nice things. I think like adjacent to that is just all the people I've met for, I don't know, like 5 hours somewhere or like 1 week during a workshop, the way they've come through for me has been surprising. Like the people who've been championing me like and the book have been very surprising, like in the best way.
I'm still pretty early on, but so far, yeah, like just meeting and like collaborating with other writers who are like also either will be soon or have recently released books makes the whole thing feel less lonely, I think, because so much writing is done by yourself. And also just like, feeling like the support of like my friends and my community. And I just think that writers really come out for each other, and it's really lovely.
Yeah, I have interviewed over 200 debut authors since launching Debutiful. That's a frequent thing I hear. And so just plugging myself one more time. If you like these types of answers, you'll definitely like my podcast. Check it out at debutiful.net. Another plug, Hannah from One Story wants to know what you're most excited about the Debutante Ball coming up, I believe, May 1st in New York City. What is everyone looking forward to? I've heard some pretty exciting things already behind the scenes.
I'm ready to dance.
I want to see all the outfits that people.
I am excited to meet the other debutantes and get them to sign my book. My copies of their books, rather.
Just like meeting everybody in person in general, I think like everyone who I've interacted with throughout this process has been virtual, email, etc. So finally being in the flesh.
Yes, meeting people is the coolest thing ever, especially after you like do podcasts and you're on Zoom or you're doing phone calls or emails. In person's really rad. Um, Before I kick it back to Hannah, I just want to thank Greenlight for doing this. Independent bookstores make the world go round. I worked at one for quite a while, and big shouts to Greenlight for running this, for selling books, and for doing all they do in Brooklyn. Huge thanks to Hannah and Lena at One Story who asked me to do this. My final question before I kick it back is, what specifically debuts, if you can, what debuts have you read recently? Are you excited about? What friends do you just want to shout your lungs out for? What is everyone vibing with recently?
I can go first. I am eagerly awaiting Pemi's novel when it comes out. Uh, I know it's not out yet, but for a book that was recently released, I'm looking forward to reading Blessings by Chukwuebuka Ibe.
Yeah, that's on my list too. Blessings. My friend Nishant, his short story collection came out last year. It's called The Best Possible Experience, Nishant Injam. I think it's wonderful. I think everybody should read it. And then Katya Apekina wrote Mother Doll, and she's hilarious. I think you would enjoy that.
I just read a novel called Monstrilio that I'm really, really obsessed with. It's like everything, it's like monsters and consumption and everything I love, and was such a delight to read. And I read it while I was traveling recently. It was a perfect little thing to have with me. And I'm really looking forward to reading A Good Happy Girl by Marissa Higgins about like messy queer people like getting messy with each other. And her language is really lovely.
Yeah, Monstrilio, you stole one of mine, but I second that. And then Amy Stuber has a book coming out. It's a collection called Sad Grown-Ups that I'm really excited about. I've gotten a chance to read some of it and it's amazing. And then as far as other debuts, Donnie Walton's The Final Revival of Opal and Nev, that's a little bit less recent at this point, but I read it recently and it's wonderful. It's fantastic. Yeah.
So many good books are coming out. That's my favorite part of every podcast is like getting recommendations. I frantically write them down and go buy them. I'll turn it back to Hannah, but again, please pre-order the books that aren't out. Please buy the books that are out. That is why we do what we do. Everyone, congratulations on your debut collection. Congratulations on the Debutante Ball. So radical. I'm going to stop talking. Hannah, thank you for all you do. This is amazing. Everyone in the chat, thank you for being here on a Wednesday night. Hannah, take it away.
Thank you, Adam. Everybody should definitely be, support, rate, subscribe to Debutiful. Thank you so much for, taking the time and doing this with us. Thank you to Greenlight for hosting us once again and supporting so many emerging writers. It's really the independent bookstores that make the difference for first-time authors. They get behind these books, they hand sell it. It's really, really important. So we have to do our turn in part as readers and buy our books from independent booksellers. So they made it really easy for you. Go to their website, click through and buy and pre-order these amazing short story collections, because pre-orders matter a lot as well. So I'm so excited to host these 4 amazing women short story writers on May 1st. So please come in Brooklyn if you are in the neighborhood. If you can't make it, you can always make a donation, because One Story is a nonprofit organization. We do not make money off of One Story. We do it for the love and for, the joy of meeting writers like these and forming friendships and doing all this together and just sort of like creating this really important community that's meant so much to Mary Beth and myself. So, but there will be drinks, there'll be dancing, there'll be fancy cocktails, there will be free books. There will also be a wonderful inspirational speech by Alice McDermott, the National Book Award winner. She'll be there on hand to give advice to these 4 writers who are starting off their careers. She'll give you some of the wisdom from her place a little bit further down the road. And we always republish those speeches in LitHub after the event, which is really, really great. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for being here. Thank you for supporting One Story. And thank you for supporting these amazing writers. So this is such a good conversation, such a great reading. It was really a joy. So thanks, Jessica. I don't know if you want to pop in one last time.
I'll come back to echo all of that. Thanks. We're such huge fans of all of you guys. You are amazing. And One Story is like where we go to like find out like what's happening next in the world of fiction. So we're grateful for the chance to hear from all of you. This recording will be up on YouTube within the next couple of days. If you missed a part and you just want to hear that again, take a look at our YouTube channel, Greenlight Bookstore. Have fun at the ball, everyone. We'll look for pics. Have a good night. Bye-bye.